Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Crossroads. I am your host, Rashida Green, and this is the show for and about environmental justice and those who fight the fight with skin as melanated as the days are long. Knowledge is power, and we are breaking down stereotypes, one episode at a time. So today is a case study episode. And before we get into that, as you know, or as I'm trying to remind myself, we're going to give some flowers today. So the person I'm giving flowers to today is Alice Ball. Alice was born in Seattle, Washington in 1892. She was the first African American and the first woman to graduate from the University of Hawaii with a master's degree in chemistry. It was 1915, and she began her career as a teacher and a researcher at the university. And while she was there, no sweat, she developed a cure for Hansen's disease, as we know it, leprosy. And using what came to be known as the Ball method, she was able to treat those with leprosy, and that was the method that was used for the next 30 years. Ball unfortunately died in 1916, and the president of the university, on some straight up bullshit, tried to take credit for Alice's work and claimed it as his own. Changed the name and everything. And it wasn't until 1922 when a paper was published that gave Alice her credit. And in the year 2000, the University of Hawaii placed a plaque in front of the Kalmuja tree, which is the tree that Ball used to develop her research. And they also gave her the Medal of Distinction in 2007. But I wanted to give her some flowers today because that is no small feat what she was able to accomplish. And we need to make sure that we're constantly giving flowers to our elders and those who, as we know from Hidden Figures and practically everything else, that we don't get the just due unless we give it to ourselves. So Alice Ball is getting flowers today. This episode and this case study is really about a current event that happened literally last week. And some dams collapsed in Midland County, Michigan. And it caused massive, massive flooding. And I'm going to be examining, what caused this in the first place, a little bit about who to blame, hitting on some science points, of course. I love my science. And why this matters. So let's first start by talking about the state of Michigan. So among its beauties, some of the issues that Michigan has is aging infrastructure. And this isn't exclusive to Michigan, too. Since 2008, 5.7 billion gallons of untreated sewage entered the waterways. 64 rivers that drain into Michigan's lower peninsula tested positive for human sewage. Michigan has 2,600 dams, and more than 10% of them have been rated as poor or in unsatisfactory conditions. There's an abundance of fresh water in the state of Michigan. There's 11,000 inland lakes and groundwater resources, and we've talked about groundwater in the past. There's 36,000 miles of streams and wetlands and beaches. And also, Michigan is the home of the Great Lakes. And 25% of residents and businesses get their water from 1 million private wells, more than 1 million private wells. And again, as we talked about in the drip episode, private wells get their water from groundwater that's accessible or closer to the surface. And Michigan has, unfortunately, an $800 million water and sewer infrastructure gap. We've talked about Flint on this show before. We know that it's a long-standing issue of clean water in Flint. And unfortunately, there are other areas in Michigan suffering from this same problem. And I'll get to those a little bit later in the show. There's also no comprehensive state requirement for collecting data on water and infrastructure conditions. And based upon some compiled research, there's estimations that it would take $25 million provisioned annually to address these infrastructure problems. So in this particular case, in talking about the dam collapsing, let's get into who the players are. We have the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they are a part of the Department of Energy, and they regulate transmission and wholesale of electricity and natural gas. And they also issue licenses for non-federal hydropower projects. Michigan's Department of the Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, I'll be calling them EGLE going forward, keep it simple. And this office was formerly called Michigan's Department of Environmental Quality. And last but certainly not least, Boyce Hydropower, LLC. They are located in Edenville, Michigan, which is a part of Midland County. And they are an electric power company, revenue of about $1.4 million, doing a little pocket watching. And this particular company owned, past tense, Edenville, Sanford, Secord, and Smallwood dams. Edenville. This dam was built in 1924 by Frank Isaac Wixom for hydroelectric power and also to control flooding. The reservoir that was made was called Wixom Lake, after the man who built the dam. And the Edenville Dam itself was called an earthen embankment, or, an artificial dam. And it's located at the confluence or the joining of two bodies of water at the Tittawabassee and Tobacco rivers. And that's what forms the lake. And this particular lake or reservoir has a storage capacity of 40,000 acre feet of water and consists of 49 miles of shoreline. The dam is 6,600 feet long and 54.5 feet tall. Legal histories, getting into the legal battles of things. So in 1998, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued a license for the Edenville project. And the point of this was to make improvements to the dam and to control floodwaters. In January of 1999, the Commissioner's Office, Michigan's Commissioner's Office of Energy Projects, issued a letter to Wolverine Power, who owned the project at the time, asking that they increase the spillway capacity. And this was never done. Keep that, put a pin in that. So spillway capacity. So the spillway is a structure that's used to provide flow from a dam or levee into a downstream area. And the purpose of it is to prevent flooding. And in June of 2004, Boyce Hydropower acquired the license to the Edenville project. Since June of 2004, none of the required changes were made. In addition to needing to increase the spillway capacity so there won't be massive ass flooding, the license also had some terms and conditions about dam safety, property rights, water quality, and public recreation and safety. And all Boyce did was request a shit ton of extensions and claim that they couldn't afford to make the required changes. They were issued a notice in September of 2018 by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and revoked their license. This rarely happens, but the federal government had to intercede after, at this point, about 14 years of nothing. And Boyce appealed, because why not? And of course, it was revoked, because what are you thinking? So after the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission interceded, Michigan's EGLE took over oversight of the dam. And so all Boyce-owned dams were given to the Four Lakes Task Force to be monitored. In October of 2018 and again in November of 2019, the dam level waters were reduced because, of course, Boyce is like, I'm not doing this. Let the waters go down. I don't care. And it took the boat owners, the fancy boat owners with their monocles. Sorry. Boat owners complained about the lowered levels of water. And so spring of last year, they raised the water levels, and they actually did it again in April of this year as well. And while this was going on in the midst of all of this, the EGLE was threatening to sue Boyce because of the reduced water levels and the impact that was having on the freshwater mussels. And mussels are mollusks, and they are intricate to maintaining fresh water because they help to filter it. Just a little tidbit. And so even though increasing the water levels would put more stress on the dam, lowering it was causing an impact to the actual ecosystem. And you're like, okay, so what should we choose to do? Should we raise this water to help some mussels, or should we keep them low so that the dam doesn't flood? And well, what we really should be saying is, why did y'all wait all this time? And this is what we have to choose between, the mussels or the peoples. Anyway, Boyce claimed they couldn't fix it. So then what happens? Oh, I'll tell you what happens. May 19th, the dam breaks. Boom, done. And the problem with this, and what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, why they had a problem with it, is because of what's called the probable maximum flood event. And this is a flood event that could be caused by meteorological changes or hydrological changes or a bit of both. And it was because they didn't have the proper spillway capacity in place in this dam. And again, that wasn't the only issue. And Boyce was also making unauthorized changes to the dam. And there was no public safety plan, and the one that they submitted back in 2013 was rejected, and they never submitted another one. Boyce also violated the Water Quality Monitoring Plan, which required any person holding a license to connect their water quality monitoring equipment to their Supervisory Control Data Acquisition, or SCADA. SCADA. Oof. And they didn't do that. And that's important because, they needed to have that in place to have remote monitoring and control over their water system. They also needed to have a plan in place and our monitoring mechanism in place for reading the levels of dissolved oxygen and the temperature. And why is dissolved oxygen important? It's important because that's what the fish breathe. It comes into the water through aeration, and that's when water's falling over the rapids or from the falls, and it's also a waste product from photosynthesis. The more you know. Okay, so why am I saying all this? Why does this matter? We talked about the dam. We know that it broke. We know that it's caused people to be displaced. Why does all this count? Well, there's more than half of the dams in this country are privately owned, just the way that Boyce privately owned Edenville Dam and other dams and did not take the proper steps to ensure that it could properly hold the spillway capacity that it needed. And now look what happened. There are in total estimated 91,458 dams in this country, half of which are privately owned. And Boyce, regardless of infractions on the federal level or the state level, they had 14 years. They had 14 years to get it together, and they didn't at all. And like I mentioned earlier, Midland County, unfortunately, is not the only place in Michigan that's hurting right now. There's also Ann Arbor, which is having massive issues with soil and groundwater contamination from gas and diesel fuel. There's trichloroethene, or TCE, that was found in the groundwater and in the soil, and this causes the cancer and a whole host of kidney, liver, and nervous system problems. Yes. And this particular study was conducted back in 2013, okay? And there was initial research in the 90s that revealed this same contamination in the 1990s. And Michigan has very, very severe contamination due to polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, or I'm going to call them PFAS because it sounds cool. But in total, there's 11,000 sites with contaminated groundwater with PFAS. And this is actually a pretty popular substance. It's nicknamed the forever chemical, PFAS, and it was widely used by 3M in everything from about the 1940s until like the 2000s. Yeah. Everything from hamburger wrappers, microwave popcorn bags, non-stick cookware, you name it, had the PFAS. And it has been found that it's in like 99% of all Americans' bloodstreams. And since we talked about the water cycle, what you should know is that water travels. So it is without a doubt that everybody else got the PFAS too. We got the PFAS. You know, I should do an episode about this. Like, I should actually do like a whole episode and just get all right into that. But in the meantime, Netflix actually has a documentary that goes through this, and I hope you watch it. I apologize for not remembering the name, but I damn sure remember the frustration and the shock and horror after I watched it. So go on and check that out. But that's why this matters, because this isn't just a Michigan problem. Michigan water doesn't just stay in Michigan. You know, water travels. And if this level of contamination is going on there, you can imagine what it looks like on a nationwide scale, especially with all the rollbacks to the environmental laws that the Cheeto Von Ass Clowns got going on. So this isn't just and this unfortunately is just not our problem, because water moves around the world. And I'm not going to leave you out here all riled up. I know I didn't have any singing bowls or anything like that. And shout out to all of y'all who tagged Relax Melodies. I really appreciate it. Keep that energy going. But so some solutions, you know, if I were you, if I were in the state of Michigan, if I were in some other state, hell, if I were in North Carolina or Tennessee or anywhere, or Nigeria, shout out to all my listeners in Nigeria. Ow. I would definitely be keeping a pulse on what's going on. Get in Boyce Hydropower's grill. Ask the EGLE what's going on with public hearings. And if I would want to know this, I would demand to know what the action plan is going to be. Are they going to be held accountable? Who is going, now that there is massive damage, now that there is massive land loss and everything, floods, and people are being displaced from their homes, what's the plan? And then after we get ourselves back together, how can we better create this dam? What's a better methodology for doing this? Is the Army Corps of Engineers the best? These are the same people who also constructed the LA River. If you all have ever, just look that up, please. So I've seen shopping carts in some parts move faster than that river. I didn't even know it was a river. You know, where they filmed Terminator and all that? Yeah, that's it. That's the river. That's how let that sink in, that feeling. That's how I felt when I saw it for the first time. I was like, you mean this isn't just an abandoned alley where they shoot films? No, it's not. Anyway, I would be getting into everybody's grill. I would be blowing up my local representatives. I will be calling whoever is my environmental office. Every state has their own office of the environment. Look it up. Look it up, Google it, go to your state's homepage and get to Googling, get to searching and figure it out. And you can also join a local environmental action network or committee in your area. You can follow them on Instagram. Everybody knows what time it is to reach the children's. You got to get on the internets. So that is what I would do. I bring this to you not just to make you scared, but also to make you informed and hopefully energized to get more involved, because we can't sit idly by. Woo-sa. Next time I'll get the singing bowls. So some shout outs. This episode is sponsored by the Black Podcast Collective, a growing community of Black podcasters. Join the collective for networking and developing partnerships. You can follow them on Instagram at BLKPOD Collective. Shout out to the Buy Melanin Expo. This expo brings Black businesses of all variety to customers, directly to the consumer. There were events, unfortunately, because we're all inside, but we can all reminisce. There used to be events in Miami, DC, and Atlanta, and one day they will return. But until that day, the events are now digital. Please follow my girl at Buy Melanin Expo, and that is BUY Melanin Expo on Instagram. If you are a creative, if you have a product that you want to sell, this is the place to do it. Get to it. We need that incense. We need those smudge bundles. We need the cowrie shells. We need all of it. We need body butter. Get to it. Buy Melanin Expo. And last, but certainly not least, after one full year of podcasting, I would like to let you know that the Crossroads podcast is now available on all platforms. That is correct. On all platforms. You no longer have to listen to me fumble through which platforms I'm on and which ones I'm not, because I'm on all of them. Wherever you like to listen to it, there it goes. Okay? And as always, I have a link to all the platforms in my bio, so I don't, again, have to fumble through trying to remember them all. It's everywhere, and you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, that's right. I said it. TikTok. Follow me at Crossroads Podcast, and Twitter and Facebook, Crossroads Pod C1. It's so weird, but that's all right. Mostly my Twitter is just for me talking crazy. So if you want some crazy talk about shows that I happen to be watching, that's what Twitter is for. In any event, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I hope this was informative. I hope this was helpful. And as always, I will see you at the Crossroads.